Welcome to Torah Smash, the podcast for nerdy Jews, where our lives of Jewish learning collide with our love of nerd culture. In each episode, we discuss what we lovingly call a Torah Smash, which we have defined as a beautiful collision of one thing from the world of Judaism with another from nerd culture. I am RDY, and joining me today are
Barack Malkin.
Ethan Lane Miller.
good to see you guys.
It is so good. This is our first recording since Austin, and it
I
is
know. Back to Zoom, it's
wild.
not the same.
Oh, I know.
Zoom, not a sponsor.
Mhm.
Wouldn't it be awkward if Skype was our sponsor?
That would be funny. Remember when people used Skype?
This episode of Torah Smash brought to you by MySpace.
Oh, this is gonna.
So tonight's
gonna be-
topic is time travel, but we're not
gonna be a
going to
fun
travel
episode.
back to the time of MySpace and Skype. We're going to travel back to the Book of Judges. And I sent you both a quote from the Book of Judges on our little spreadsheet, but let me read it.
I didn't do the homework.
That's okay.
You told me I
wasn't
didn't
really
have to do
homework.
the
It was more
homework.
a marker. So I'm going to read the verse, and just to give a little background of what's happening, this is Judges chapter 14 is the story of Samson. Samson, for those who might not know, is the Bible's strong person. He's the hero who bests the Philistines, and he's basically working as being really nice. We might say an agent of God, but really he's a tool of God to wipe out the Philistines. And the first thing that happens to Samson is he meets a lion on the road to Timnah and rips it apart with his bare hands. And then when going back on the road, he discovers that bees have built a hive inside the carcass of the lion. And so a little bit later, he gets married and he's kind of joking around with the guests at his wedding. And he proposes this riddle to them. He says, out of the eater came something to eat, out of the strong came something sweet. And for 3 days, the wedding guests could not answer the riddle. So that is all I'm giving you. What nerdy topic does this have to do with?
Okay, I'm gonna take just a big old guess. Is it the trope when you're in a D&D game and you have to avoid a combat by like doing some sort of puzzle or riddle?
That is so close, and I'm going to let Brock guess.
I was gonna say that riddle feels far-fetched because he's the only one that saw that. So it feels like an inside joke. So I'm gonna say inside jokes.
Oh, neat. Okay. Well, Ethan said the word puzzle, and I wanted to talk about puzzles today. And like it is an inside joke in that particular instance. It could be argued that it is possible to figure it out. Out of the eater came something to eat. So there's something that usually eats people but inside it is something you can eat. Most of the things that were predators back then, nobody ate the meat, so it had to be something else. And then out of the strong came something sweet. Well, what's something sweet that would be in that carcass that is something we eat? Well, it must be honey, and so it's possible to figure it out.
That feels like a far stretch. Like
For sure.
what if he
For
was
sure.
traveling with like freshly baked cookies and dropped them inside? And so you can't assume that honey is inside this carcass that you've assumed. Like it
Also,
really is.
keep in mind this story was written in a time where people didn't know what sugar was. They
Sure.
they used honey as a sweetener.
Okay.
So something sweet is either honey or figs.
I guess you had to be there.
Ah.
Oh,
Um,
that joke was
but-
really buzzing around in your mind.
oh man, that one really stung. So, like again, I agree with you. The possibility is minute that you would figure it out on your own, like nearly impossible, but not quite impossible.
Sure.
So this was a riddle or a puzzle. And puzzles are something that I think is one of my big nerdy pursuits. I start just about every day with a cup of coffee and the New York Times crossword, then the spelling bee, Wordle, Quirtle, Octordle, and Framed, which is this movie guessing game based on like one frame from the movie. All of this takes me like 20 minutes or so. But I don't usually do anything until I've done that.
Hmm.
And then my second cup of coffee, and then I get my day started. So, do you guys have similar puzzling habits?
Not at all.
Really?
I start my day by waking up and petting my cat.
No, I mean, like, are there puzzles that you regularly do?
Not regularly, no.
Oh, that's fascinating.
In the winter season, our family takes over the dining room table with a roll-up puzzle mat.
Oh, I love that.
And so when we get stuck inside on the weekends and such, and we don't have anything else to do, that takes over the table. So we did a couple of large puzzles this winter, and the boys have been were more involved than they had been in the past. So that was really nice. There was a point I did do the framed movie puzzle you're talking about. I had 3 movie puzzles I had found that I really liked. I did framed, box office game, and Actorl. Like you're talking about Wordle, but there's one called
Yeah,
Actorl.
I've heard of Actordle. Yeah.
So I used to do those every day, but other than that, I think the only it's not even a puzzle. I do Duolingo every day. And
Yeah.
then other puzzle things that I thoroughly enjoy, I'd say would be either escape rooms, just not as regular, or on the weekend mornings, I play Zelda with my boys, and that is loaded with a bunch of puzzles and riddles. So
Oh, that's cool.
yeah.
I love putting puzzles into games that I'm DMing. I think it's a really fun
Mhm.
aspect of playing D&D. So Ethan, I think it's like pretty natural that you would think that I would go there. And I also think that, do just kind of stimulating our brains first thing in the morning, like I find it very helpful. Um, I'm the same way with escape rooms. It's one of our family's favorite activities. Um, and when I say family, it's actually like an expanding group because depending on which part of the family we're hanging out with will determine like who will go to the escape room and who will
Mhm.
sit at home with the people who don't want to go.
That's fun.
Um, and I love the fact that Barack, when you came to Chicago, we did one together.
Yeah,
I hope the three of us can do one together someday. I think that would be super fun because I do think we each bring unique skills to puzzle
Yeah.
solving that would make us a pretty formidable team.
yeah.
Um,
My wife and I, except for the first escape room we did, I'm pretty sure that was the only one we did not make it out successfully. But other than that, we are undefeated, and we have got whether it's
exactly
just
the same.
us or a small group of other people.
Exactly the same. And I will say the first escape room I ever did was a synagogue event. And as such, I didn't want to like over insert myself into things. And I feel like there's a part of me that's like, if I had like pushed and been the type A person that I am, if I do like let the leash go, um, then we might have been more successful because what I wanted, there's this lock that someone was just having trouble with. And I just held myself back. I refused to go in and go, let me do it.
Question: is that how you behave in your leadership style? When you
No,
see somebody
that's a really
struggling,
good
you hold back? Because
the
I've
the
I
the
oh, go
way
ahead.
the way I actually behaved is how I behave in my leadership style. I let them do it.
That's what I mean.
Oh yeah, yeah. But if we were playing with family, I would be like, let me try.
Yeah. Well, I love doing escape rooms for, I used to always do them for board leadership development with either teens or adults, or camp
Same.
staff. And because I discovered that they let their guard down and they will behave the way that they do when they are under pressure. And so
Yes, yes, yes.
it gives me the really early look at what I should expect of who is going to sit quietly in the corner, let everybody do it, the work, who is going to get way too stressed out by this game that is not important, and who is going to take charge, who is going to make sure there's communication. All of this stuff is totally visible. I think that's why my wife and I are so successful, is because we are constantly communicating in real life, that when we are in an escape room, there is constant understood communication. And that's, I think, why we're so good. But I enjoyed that process so much that when I was the assistant director for 6 Point SciTech, I built a custom escape room for the staff retreat for the leadership team. And so
Oh,
we were at Eisner Camp, and I created an escape room where they had to solve a puzzle on the cabin porch. And there were two going on simultaneously. I set up two rooms at the same time. And so there were two teams doing this. So they had to enter the porch, and they got inside the cabin, and then they had to solve puzzles and riddles that were in the sleeping area and the bathroom area that would then unlock the front door again.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, and I just was able to sit back and watch and see how the leadership team reacted to this game that was like science and camp related, and it's always just really nice to see how that comes out. I think how people react in those sort of situations are really telling about their leadership style, not their personality, but their leadership style.
I would do different sort of puzzles. I do like social deduction games with my teen leaders.
Yeah, that's great, Ethan. And I also take my teams to escape rooms to yes, to suss out the kind of leadership they are, also to do bonding together. And this year I'm at a synagogue where the staff was large enough that we used two escape rooms. So
Wow.
we played two rooms at the same time, and it was fascinating. I split the teams up totally randomly, but I tried to make sure that like I was on a separate room from the other rabbi, and nobody was in a room with their direct assistant or someone they reported to directly. For the most part, that was a little hard to do with being a
Sure.
senior rabbi and an executive director was there as well. But the room that I was in was a very competitive group of people, and we were really supportive to each other at the same time. And I think there was also a little of everybody being on their best behavior because I was still new to them. And the other room was like, we didn't care. We were having fun. We were making fun of each other. We solved stuff accidentally. So it was a pretty interesting difference between the style that I witnessed and the style that was reported to us. But I think that there's something really valuable that can be learned through doing puzzles together. Natalie and I do jigsaw puzzles all the time. It used to be Natalie and the kids and I would do them every winter on the table, but now the kids go to their rooms and leave us alone, which sounds sweet, but we would like them to play with us.
Yeah.
So, what other things in Jewish life have to do with puzzling? Like what's Jewish about puzzling?
I think I'm going to answer using Dungeons and Dragons, because in D&D, puzzles don't look like puzzles. I remember when I started playing, my DM, like the second or third game, had us try to capture a magical deer. And I was like, and when he sent us on this quest, I was like, why? You don't want us to fight the deer? No, don't fight the deer. And we can't talk to it? No, none of you have speak to animals. You can't talk to it. Like, it's not a conversation. It's not a combat. Then why are we doing this? Like, what is the point here? And I realized afterwards, oh, it's essentially a very creative puzzle.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a there's one answer to this puzzle, right? I think that's what happens a lot in life or in Judaism. Something happens, you have to figure out what to do. It's a puzzle, but there's not one right answer, right? And I think that in a lot of areas of Judaism, this is a very vague answer, but in a lot of areas of life and with Judaism, things happen and you use the knowledge you have and the skills you have to figure out how to move forward.
Yeah, I think that's a great metaphor, Barak, especially since in most of life, puzzles don't look like puzzles.
Yeah.
Unless you are going to do a puzzle for entertainment. But life is full of puzzles.
Yeah.
I think Barack worded it so eloquently and beautifully.
Mm-hmm.
I guess my contribution would be yes to everything Barack said, plus perhaps exploring the idea that there are multiple paths to the exit or to the answer or to whatever it is you're looking at.
Yeah. And very often we cling to the answer that we first think of, and that can get us stuck. We can be so sure that we're right that we just can't see other possibilities. The in the Samson example, he gives this wedding party the riddle to kind of show off, but then as soon as they say the answer, his understanding immediately goes to, oh, you learned it from my wife. He says what he says is something to the effect, I'm not looking at the text anymore, but he says something to the effect of, if you had not plowed with my heifer, you would never have solved my riddle.
Woof.
Yeah, right? So he's not only accusing them of getting the answer from his wife, he's accusing them of sleeping with her to get the answer.
Yeah.
And that's like, it kind of gets him hoisted up by his own petard, because that sets off a whole series of things that the Philistines try and attack or best or keep Samson out of their things for whatever reason, and it sets Samson against the Philistines, which is what God wanted in the first place. God wanted an excuse to wipe out the Philistines, and so voila, here is Samson, and just gets madder and madder at the things that they do, and they get madder and madder at him until they eventually send Delilah, who figures out his big secret. She puzzles out of him that if she cuts his hair, he'll have no more strength. So he presents another puzzle, but he needs to just tell her the answer. She ends up not figuring it out. How do you feel about getting clues when you're solving puzzles?
I I prefer not to have clues as
Mm.
long as possible, because then it doesn't feel like I've done it. Like there's a piece of me that enjoys that, and I get why people want it, because you're then experiencing it. Like it's like watching somebody else play a game in totality. You're not the one to figure out what to do and where to go, but you get to enjoy the storyline that's created from that experience. So I think it
Mm.
depends on the situation, but when I'm doing stuff, I try for as long as possible to not take a clue.
That's interesting. There's among people who do the spelling bee every day, as far as I understand, or I should say, among people I've talked to who do the spelling bee every day, like I do, there's this whole like hints culture. So there is a little tab on the spelling bee game where you can get hints. And it's my personal practice that I feel like I have been defeated if I click the hints button
Yeah.
before I've gotten a certain amount or certain percentage.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
And there are people who say like, "Oh, I don't use the hints," or once I click the hints, then I've lost, or my score doesn't count after that, or whatever. But to me, that comes as a part of the game. Where I don't, there's another button where you can go to the community forum, which was designed as a place for people to just chat. But apparently, there are people who give you the answers, or like really easy to figure out clues to get the answers. To me, that's going above and beyond. Like that's defeating the purpose of like me solving the puzzle.
Yeah.
But at the
Hmm.
same time, many puzzles in real life, and no, I don't think spelling bee is real life, it's a game. But many puzzles that we're actually affected by, we don't feel the need to do it ourselves, or we shouldn't feel the need to do it ourselves.
Yeah, when I'm in an escape room and they say, "Okay, you've got 3 clues." I prefer to use 0 or 1, but if their custom is if the game is, "Hey, you'll get 3 clues," then I don't mind 3 clues, but I want to hold them off as long as possible just in case we need them to finish.
There
Yeah,
are also some mechanics in certain escape rooms where you don't get on the leaderboard if you've used X amount of clues.
Yeah.
oh. Yeah, I mean, basically what you're saying, Barack, is what, and you too, RDY, is it's there for a reason. Someone
Yeah.
intentionally took the time to build it into the system.
Hmm.
Yeah.
But if you
Yeah.
go outside the system, like searching the internet for answers to crossword puzzles, to me, that's not getting clues. That's cheating.
It reminds me of when we were kids, like when Zelda came out, when the original Zelda came out. There is no way anybody could have found those hidden bushes where you need to plant a bomb. Zero. There's like you had to go around one by one by one. You found that out by having conversations in school. And that was, quote, the cheat in that sense. And nowadays, you're not talking about those in school. So if you go to play one of those classes games, you have to look online of like, hey, where do I plant a bush to find the hidden temple? Because there's no clues in the old games. Like the current Zeldas have all like cracked rocks, and you can tell that it's a new space. But in the original one, there's no difference in the space for you to know where to find those hidden spots.
Someone had to find it, right?
Yeah, and then they talked about it.
Right. So it was possible. There is a way.
It's hard, man.
It's usually just random. Like I've definitely played games where I've been like, oh, I accidentally did that.
Yeah.
Do you remember back in the day when if you wanted to get hints, you had to purchase it in a magazine for your video games?
Oh, Nintendo Power? I had
Yeah.
Nintendo
Yeah.
Power.
Nintendo Power or any of those sort of
they had a-
magazines.
They had a call line.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think have we talked about this?
I think so. I think we did.
Yeah.
I'll talk about the puzzles then. This winter, in terms of cheating, Michelle apparently, I didn't realize this, doesn't like to use the box of the puzzle to do the puzzle. She likes to find like the image on its own, whereas I look at the piece and I look at the puzzle box and I say, okay, where does this go? She views that in a sense as like taking a hint and a cheat, as opposed to just dumping the box and trying to figure out the puzzle.
That's so funny. There's this book called The Puzzler by A.J. Jacobs, my favorite author, who where he says in the book that there are two schools of thought when solving jigsaw puzzles. One is to look at the box and then try to find the piece that fits where the picture is on the box. And the other school of thought is to pick up a piece and then look at the box to determine where it goes. So in his two schools of thought, they're both using the box.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, that's fascinating. One of the things that I think is fascinating about Judaism is that there are a lot of really complex laws and rules. And as I studied Talmud with my Chavruta is a group of people who study regularly together. I guess I could have just said it's a study group. The three people that I study with, we are studying what's called Daf Yomi, where we on our own 6 days a week read a page of Talmud a day. And then when we get together on the day of the week that we meet, we read a page together and then we talk about like what it's been talking about leading up to it this week. Very often topics will span much more than 1 or 2 weeks. So we'll be talking about the same thing for a while, basically. And the way they figure out who's right and who's wrong on like the rules of Jewish law involve a lot of puzzling skills. They have certain things, they call it a kal vachomer, which translates to a Latin phrase called a priori, which is a legal phrase that means we've already figured something out that is a little simpler than what you're talking about. And therefore, this one that's more complicated should also fit that rule, because if the simpler one fits, then the more complicated one will fit it too. So they'll have like rules like you're allowed to use a verse to figure out a Jewish law, but once you've used a verse to figure out that Jewish law, you can't use that verse to figure out a different Jewish law.
Oh.
Oh,
Yeah.
what?
Yeah, right? So this is like, do you look at the hints or not, to me?
That's interesting.
Yeah, I don't know why you wouldn't use it again.
Because there are no wasted words in the Torah. You've already figured out what this word is for, or this phrase is for. Therefore, you can't use it again to figure out something else.
Okay.
And it would also open up weird precedents, because you could say, well, this means that, and then later on someone could say, well, actually it also means this, and it could open the door for
Oh,
people
I
to
see
make
what you're
rulings.
saying. Okay. I misunderstood. Yeah.
Yeah, once the rabbis in quotes, once they agree that this verse means this thing, then you can't use it to mean a different
Sure.
thing.
Okay.
There's also, Barak, you mentioned that you once did an escape room for camp.
Yeah.
I once did an escape room for the Afikomen at a Seder. So
Oh,
it was
that's nice.
it was fun. It was a reverse
Brilliant.
escape room. So when we broke the matzah, I didn't go high. I didn't like, I wrapped it up and I didn't like sneak away and hide it, I opened up a lockbox and I put the matzah in the lockbox and I locked it, and it was a combination lock. So I said the combination is somewhat, clues to the combination are hidden all around the synagogue, and when it's time, you'll go and find the combination.
That's nice. I
It
like
was
that.
super fun. And I used the same rules that I always use for finding the afikomen, like nothing will be in doors or drawers. But I did like I had a magnetic key box that I put on the side of a door frame to make it look like a mezuzah, and everyone just walked right past it.
Yeah.
I
That's
didn't
so fun.
even I didn't even disguise it or anything. I just put it up there, but people just thought it was a mezuzah and walked right past it. But
That's so good though.
it was fun. It was a lot of fun. What other puzzling things do you do with your Jewish selves? I mean, I'm like ready for a bounty of things from a camp director, Ethan.
It's for me, the big puzzle is actually like infusing it all together. I mean, it's one of the reasons that I selfishly enjoy this podcast. It's intentionally pushing us to merge these things and these lessons together. So, like last summer, or 2 summers, I mean, it blends together at this point, but when I had to stand in front of the staff and talk about, you know, I could be blunt and I could say, don't gossip each other don't gossip about things to each other. But instead, it's like, okay, what can I do? What brilliant Jewish text can I pull in about Lashon Hara and help make this happen and help prove my point? So I love like it's kind of a Torah smash. I have one part of it, and what's the other part of it I'm going to plug on in to make it happen.
Yeah, I love that. Barak, are there things that, I mean, besides what you've already mentioned, are there things that you do that where you bring in puzzles to your work?
In my work now, no, not really. I will create extra work in trying to solve an issue, like building extra spreadsheets or pulling extra data because I have a question that I want to have solved.
Hmm.
And so I ask the question to create the puzzle and then, figure out where the answer lies by working my way through it. But I don't have the need or opportunity to create puzzles in my work right now. I would say in life today, the puzzles will show up with my kids. And being a parent and wanting to have them figure it out it's hard. It's hard to stand back. And as you said, with your leadership, like to say, I can do it right now, but I want to step back and see if they can do it.
Mhm.
Sometimes it's very hard to do that, but I really like to give the kids a task and just see what happens.
Have you heard of the 100 prisoner puzzle?
I don't know if I did.
Okay. It's a little complicated. It's a relatively famous logic puzzle. 100 prisoners are given numbers 1 through 100. They're shown a room with 100 boxes, also numbered from 1 to 100. Inside each box is a card, also with the numbers 1 to 100, but the cards are randomized so that they're not in the same order as the boxes. The prisoners are allowed to go into the room one at a time in numerical order and open up to 50 boxes in any order. If all the prisoners find the card with their number, they're all set free. If one of them does not find the correct number, all of them will stay in jail. They're allowed to strategize before they begin, but once the first prisoner goes into the room with the boxes, they may not communicate with one another at all. So, done like that, straight up, each prisoner has a 50% chance that they will find their own box if they randomly choose 50 boxes. But for 100 people to all succeed at their 50-50 shot, Barak, do you know the odds of this?
50%?
No,
No.
all
It's
100 of them
it's
have to
it would
succeed.
be what it would be like factorial, right?
Right.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
It's
Sure.
infinitesimal. I don't know the number, but it's tiny. But there is a strategy that gives them a 31% chance of success. But if the first prisoner is allowed to inspect all of the boxes before he chooses, then there is a way to guarantee success for the whole group.
You take a marker and you write it on the boxes for everybody.
No.
Oh,
Good guess.
Not laying them out in order based on what was inside?
No, not quite. They're already not in order based on what's inside.
but you can't
Right, but
reorder
if
them.
he inspects them, he could reorder them.
He can't reorder them, but he can make one switch. He can switch one pair of cards if he
Okay.
wants.
Great. Crazy. Can he then instruct the prisoners in which order to enter?
Not they're ordering in numerical order, and they have to decide the strategy in advance because he can't communicate after he goes in. He can't communicate with them.
Hmm.
I have no idea.
So the way they would do it is that they would have to. So the 31% chance way to do it, they would open a box and say their number is one, and they open box number one. So whatever you start with the box that matches your number, and say you look in the box and it's 38, then you go to box number 38. And then you keep going to the box number that matches the card you open until you eventually loop around to the one that has your number.
Hmm.
So the only way this strategy would not work is if there was one loop that was more than 50 boxes.
Right.
So that ends up being a 31% chance of it working straight up, where everybody goes in, no loop is bigger than 50 boxes, and everybody eventually loops back to their number. But if the first person is allowed to go in and inspect, he can guarantee that no loop is bigger than 50, and it would only require one switch to guarantee it.
Hmm.
But what if you choose the wrong loop?
But your number is automatically part of the loop because you go to the one that matches.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Oh, yeah. Oh, that's nice.
Mhm. So the key to this puzzle solving on the part of the prisoners is communication
Yeah.
and working together.
Well, that's so smart though. I like
Yeah.
that.
And
Right.
it
So he
also,
essentially he doesn't even have to look in 100 boxes. He just has to look in 50 boxes, and on the 49th box or the 50th box, whatever, then swap that card with the first card he looked at, and there he's created a loop.
yeah, well, he'd have to, they're all, I mean, any random system is going to naturally have loops, even if
Right.
it's a 100 box loop.
Yeah. Oh,
But
because it's randomized. Sure.
right. But so it's going to loop guaranteed. The question is, does it loop back small enough that we all succeed?
Yeah.
So that would be the need to switch and look in all the boxes to make sure the loops are all fewer than 51.
That's a cool puzzle. I like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But also like think to the psyche of the prisoner solving the puzzle. Because how many times do we have a situation where we are win or lose and it's a 50-50 shot for everyone in the room and we go, I'll just take my 50-50 shot.
Mhm.
Hmm.
And in this case, if they work together, then they've got a 31% chance of fixing everything rather than an infinitesimal chance.
They also have to hope that somebody's smart enough to figure out that mathematical
Sure.
switch.
Yeah, sure.
And
But,
I guess you'd hope in a group of 100 prisoners, one person is not only smart enough to know that, but charismatic enough to lead the rest of the group into making that change.
yeah, and to make sure that the person who's got the one understands perfectly what they have to do.
Sure. Yeah.
But like trying not to delve too deep into a realistic situation.
Yeah.
How many puzzles are we presented in this world? How many problems? There is so much going on that we say, oh, I want my side to do it correctly. And your side, I don't care quite so much of the problem being solved as long as my side gets to do it. And how much better would our world be if we just said, hey, even if we're only going to have a 31% chance of totally fixing this thing, it's a way better chance than if we just keep going for ourselves.
You were like edging on political conversation. I'm just holding
You're
myself back.
yeah. You've put a lot of thought into this.
A little bit. And probably better than talking politics, again, going to the Jewish arena, there's a concept called machloket. Machloket literally translates to argument, and there are ways to argue that are considered good ways to argue, and are ways to argue that are considered bad ways to argue. They call it a machloket b'shem shamayim, an argument for the sake of heaven. And the people that they say do the best at argument for the sake of heaven are Hillel and Shammai,
Yeah.
because when they argue, they're arguing to learn from each other. And when they are through with their argument, no matter who wins, and it's usually Hillel, the winner teaches the argument of the person who was incorrect to say, look, we can learn from this, but here's the actual answer.
I like that example because there is sort of this in my head, there's like this puzzle manifesting in the conversation. But when I think about those types of conversations that I have, like say, for instance, like with my wife, I don't view those as arguments. And so, because we are both so open and communicative and really on the same page of conversations, that when we disagree, they're not arguments. They're really good conversations about what each of us want or believe in that scenario. And so I don't view those as arguments for the sake of heaven. I view those as just healthy conversations.
Yeah, and if you want to phrase it that way, I think that's beautiful. And when, it could be as simple as trying to figure out the best course of action for your children.
Right.
And you might both have different ideas, and you're presenting different ideas, but you're listening to figure out
Yeah.
whose idea is actually best, not for winning, but for the kids.
Yeah.
And maybe arguing has a negative connotation, and that's why you don't like it.
Yeah,
But
probably.
I don't think in Judaism it's a negative connotation.
Right. Because Jews love to argue. So it's not.
Yeah, and because if an argument, b'shem shemayim, an argument that is done, I'm going to say correctly,
Mhm.
it's done not in a sense of trying to win or trying to prove a point or trying to convince someone of something. It's trying to learn, trying to listen to the other person, hear what they have to say. And you absolutely must be willing to admit you're wrong if you're going to start an argument for the sake of heaven. If you're going to be involved in presenting a point of view, if you're not willing to be wrong, then it's not an argument. It's a moment of bullying.
Yeah, when my wife and I first started dating, I was living in New Jersey and she was living in LA. And so before I asked her to officially like be boyfriend, girlfriend, we had a very serious conversation and I said to her, the only way I'm going to move forward with this if both of us can completely agree that at some point one of us has to move, but neither of us are going to force the other person to do so. But we have to know that we can't forever live on the opposite coast. And so we both have to go into this knowing that at some point one of us will move. We just don't know who that's going to be. It'll be based out of the necessity. And it ended up that 2 years later, she entered a master's program that was going to take 2 or 3 years. And I said, well, I'm not going to wait 3 years for you. It sounds like I'm moving to LA.
When I first met your children and we were sitting at that restaurant in Orange County,
Yeah.
you told me this when I asked you about how you got together.
Yeah.
Although you at that time you didn't say that you asked her to be your girlfriend, so I didn't know that you had actually like officially asked her to go steady, which I think is very cute.
Yeah.
Something that I keep coming back to is not just like D&D, but like RPG video games where you get a choice. You can enter this combat or you can take a stab at this puzzle.
Mm.
There's got to be a metaphor in there somewhere.
For sure. And I think it's also a very Jewish way of solving problems. Like, are you going to solve it with your fists? Or are you going to solve it with your brain?
Mhm.
And I think it would be a very Jewish answer to that question to choose the brain first. I think that's a very valuable part of being a people who values strongly solving puzzles together.
Do you think there's anything? I'm a big fan of puzzles, and so right, I'm trying to think of all the stuff that I have. Right on my desk here in my office, I have a number of different Rubik's cubes. I
Mm.
have some different modular type puzzles where there's weird shapes mixed in with the other ones, right? I have sitting here in front of me that my kids really love to play with. Um, this Triforce puzzle that has to come apart and go back
Oh, yeah.
together. And they have this one of a master sword in a block that you have to figure out how to get out. And so
Cool.
I really like and those don't come with hints. And so I don't know if there's other pieces like that, but I'm a I had the was it Sharper Image at one point had this orb. I forget what it was called, with these rotating cylinders that had hieroglyphics on them, and very few people open them. And I still have mine. I never was able to open it, and I didn't want to go online to find the answer.
Mhm.
And now that I don't think I could, because maybe I could if I searched, because people have solved them. But that was I don't know if that was pre-internet, but I've just had it for so long. But I'm a big fan of trying to figure things out. And I just, yeah, love puzzles. This was a very fun one for me.
I do too. And I used to have a puzzle box on my desk that someone got me once that took me a long time to figure out. And I went through a phase that I remembered while you were talking. I went through a phase of being obsessed with tavern puzzles. Do you remember those?
No.
Tavern puzzles were these little wrought iron shapes that you would have. It was something, it's sometimes there would be a little rope or a wooden
Oh, I
slide.
yes. That's what I'm talking
Yeah.
about with these modular puzzles where there's interlocking pieces that you can't see right off the bat. Right, with ropes and beads and not locks, but like curved metal bars that
Yeah.
interwove
Linked.
to, yes, linked. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so I was obsessed with those. And there were some that like, they level from 1 to 10.
Yeah.
And there's some that you can like just quickly get done. There's one with a wooden shuttle and I think nine like ringlet shapes on hooks that has something like 400 moves to get it out.
Wow. That's
Um,
fun.
and and that's one that I was never able to solve. I was able to unlock it from six of the rings, and I could never get it all the way out.
I enjoy these so much, these modular puzzles, these tavern puzzles, whatever,
Mhm.
that when I worked at the summer camp, I kept, I want to say, 7 different puzzles on my desk. So if somebody ever came to me, I would say, like, hold on a second, like, I'm finishing this. Why don't you work your way through these puzzles? They started very easy and worked their way up. And very few people made it all the way to 7, but it was something that I kept out as sort of a time waster for me to be able to finish what I'm doing while they're just sitting there. And I always had 7 on my, like 7 or 8 of those on my desk. Yeah.
That's really cool. As I look around my apartment, most of my decorations are pretty sparse because I'm living away from where all the main decorations are. But the two that are prominent in front of me both have some sort of either wordplay or punniness, or you have to know something to be able to enjoy the
Yeah.
art. I've got a Trey Anastasio drawing that's made out of the words of fish song titles, and I have a picture of a bridge with a bunch of bats coming out of it with Batman all over it, which is the Bat Bridge here in Austin.
I appreciate that. My office has a bookcase door,
Hmm.
but on the outside of the bookcase door, on the upper right, walking in, is a mezuzah. And so, for people who know what a mezuzah means there's a door,
There's a
right?
yeah.
They would be able to suss out that this bookcase is not a bookcase when it is shut, that there's something there. So that little hint for the people on the outside. Yeah.
That is fantastic. I think all of these are puzzles in a way. Like the mezuzah
Yeah.
is more obvious than the paintings, but in
Yeah.
order to fully appreciate it, you have to know a little something.
Yeah. Yeah,
I
absolutely.
love that.
I also think there's something valuable that doing puzzles has taught me, that there is value in stepping away and coming back at the problem with fresh eyes.
That's
Yes.
great. That's really great. And for me, the big thing is always teamwork. Doing them together. And this is where we get back into like getting the hints that are designed, that are part of the system,
Yeah.
versus the hints that are like the cheats and whatever. There are some games and puzzles and riddles that are absolutely impossible unless you have help.
Yeah.
And I think there is beauty in that. And it's not just designed puzzles like the 100 Prisoner puzzle, but it's puzzles like preventing gun violence and figuring out who gets reproductive health and solving climate change and the national imbalance of power and so and so many other things. And there are moments where we can get frustrated with our teammates and just try to be right. And yet, if we would reach out to one another and use that chance and not just need to be right, but be willing to have a 31% chance of succeeding instead of just going for perfection and nothing less,
Yeah.
we we might
Yeah.
be able to find these solutions together. And going back to AJ Jacobs, he says we need to be curious and not furious.
Nice.
Nice.
I do like, you may have just swung my head in some other things I've been struggling with, of shooting for 31% and not worrying about perfect. I think that is a great, right. When I do puzzles, I remember, do you remember last year's, was it last year's anniversary D&D episode? No, it was the first one we did. And we couldn't open this treasure box. And I was like, all right, I smashed the box. Like, it's a wooden box. Like, that's another way in, instead of figuring out this code. Like, it wasn't maybe that the right way, but it worked. We didn't have to go 100% and solve the code. There was always another avenue.
One of my favorite moments from the TV show Taskmaster, not to be confused with the Marvel character Taskmaster, was when a contestant brought in a little puzzle box and Greg, the Taskmaster, couldn't open it. So he just takes it and smashes it on the ground and opens it up.
Yeah.
And he goes, well, I opened the puzzle.
Yeah.
But there's also like, yes, you could do it that way, but you run a risk. In the novel The Da Vinci Code, it was made clear that if this was forced open, a little glass vial of vinegar would break and destroy the clue that was inside.
Yeah.
So you had to use your brain in that. And with the box that you smashed in D&D that first year, I had to make the conscious decision as a DM to not let you break what was inside it, which was fragile. It was a violin.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think I was smashing the lock on the front or something. But
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. But there was a chance. There's always a chance.
Absolutely. Yeah, cool.
Well, that'll do it for this episode of Torah Smash. Our fiscal sponsor is Jewish Creativity International. Our theme music was created by Sean Fogel. You can check out Sean's bands and studio work at www.thesleepywest.com. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to rate and review us wherever you listen. It helps others find us and is an excellent way to support the podcast. We do want to hear from you and continue today's nerdy discussion. Go to torahsmash.com to find where to connect with us online, purchase swag from our store, support us with a donation, find previous episodes, and more. And what else do Samson and puzzling have in common? Sometimes we start out strong, but when things get a little hairy, everything can come tumbling down. Brock is really tired. We can totally mess with him tonight.
100%.
Oh, yeah.
100%. It's more of like a moral lesson than a joke.